What is good, and welcome back to another episode of The Hobbyist. For today's episode, I'm going to do something a little bit different, something I really haven't done a whole lot of before. This is kind of an opinion piece. Really, it's more of a question. Back when I started, getting back into collecting cards, this was during the pandemic when I started collecting again. I had acquired some cards, and I wasn't totally new to grading. I knew it existed because it was kind of around back in the 90s when I was collecting, but it was nothing I really was all that interested in. But now, getting back into it in these last year or so, year to 2 years, whatever it's been, I noticed that grading had become really prominent, and a lot of people were basically purchasing raw, grading, and selling for big money, basically making a profit, trying to make a profit. Lately, and that led to some congestion, especially with PSA and with Beckett. And then I think that also led to other grading companies just kind of showing up. So when I got into collecting again, I was seriously considering sending some of my cards off to be graded. So when I did that, I kind of looked at the grading companies that were around at the time. At the time, it was obviously PSA and Beckett. I had remembered Beckett from back in the day just because of the magazines, the Beckett Monthly. I came across PSA and quickly realized that they were, the leader of the bunch, of the group. And then I, learned about SGC a little bit just by watching some YouTube videos and some reveals and things like that. I'd seen HTA stuff and some CSG stuff, and just by looking at everything, just looking at the slabs, from online reveals on YouTube, I liked the CSG slab. At the time, their label was green. That didn't really bug me. I don't know. I mean, obviously it didn't look the greatest. It wasn't really all that great, in pictures. I ended up buying a, kind of a slab from each company. I purchased a card from each company so I can see it in hand. And in hand, the CSG with the green label really wasn't that bad. It was actually, the slab itself was really, really nice. I could tell that from the beginning. And it felt a lot better quality than the PSA slab. Not as good as the Beckett slab. The SGC slab felt kind of cheap. I'm not going to lie. It felt kind of thin and kind of weak. So those were kind of my first impressions. I didn't buy any HGA because they really weren't. They didn't have that long of a track record. CSG didn't have that long of a track record in sports cards, but they had a huge track record in other collectibles and game trading cards like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, things like that. So that's why I included them into my first review, just to kind of figure out where I wanted to start sending my cards to be graded. PSA at the time, I think had really, really long wait times, really long lead times, and their grading prices were starting to go up. And then eventually they just shut down before I even made my decision on where to send my cards. So that kind of for me, that kind of took them out of the equation. And then Beckett was I wasn't really hearing a whole lot of great things about Beckett just because of, whatever was going on. They were kind of having the same issues as PSA. They had a backlog, and then just comments that were being made didn't seem like they were the Beckett of old. So I kind of focused things down to SGC and CSG. Obviously, SGC had been around grading cards, sports cards, longer than CSG. CSG was kind of, just months into the sports card grading territory. But like I said, I had done some research and found that, they weren't new to grading collectibles, just new to grading sports cards. And they were also affiliated with CGC, which grades comic books. And at the time, I was also looking at comic books to purchase and to collect, which I do have some. I do collect comic books. So So yeah, just kind of looking at a few different things. And so I kind of looked at their grading standards. And to me, they were all really pretty similar. So one of the questions I was asking myself, why are they different? Why are they looked at as, the top grading company, especially for resale? I mean, I could see, for people that like the slab, they like the slab. That is what it is. It's kind of it is what it is. But for resale values, it didn't really, I was confused, really confused. So in this presentation, I'm just going to kind of look at some of the thought process that I went through, the things that I looked at, and eventually, full disclosure, eventually I chose to go with CSG, because one, their prices were in reach. They were affordable. I really liked their slabs. And then, even after they changed their slabs to the new label, to have the new label, I mean, that just kind of sealed it for me, that I would just keep going with them, because I like consistency in my collecting. So I'm really not looking for resale also. So that was kind of one of the things that, I was dealing with. But why is PSA King? That was kind of one of the things that I was thinking about and trying to figure out. So what I ended up doing was I went to the PSA website, the Beckett website, the SGC and the CSG websites, and I looked at their grading criteria. Started with a Gem Mint 10. And in this little presentation, this little slideshow, I'm not going to go through every grade because that would take forever. I just kind of looked at the Gem Mint 10s, or the Gem Mint for the 9.5 for Beckett, and the Gem Mint 10 for SGC and CSG, and then the 9s, because PSA doesn't have a 9.5, which I also thought was kind of odd. But that's neither here nor there. So just kind of looking at the 10s and the 9s, obviously for SGC and CSG, they do have a 9.5, and that 9.5 just means it's better than a 9, but not quite a 10. So that was pretty logical for me. So in this little analysis, I'll call it, I'm just going to look at the 10s, the Gem Mint grade, and the 9. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the four companies here, because I couldn't fit them all on one screen and to make it easily readable. So I'll be going back and forth for these four, the four kind of common cornerstones of grading: the corners, surface, edges, and centering. So starting with PSA, because they are the top dog, they are the king, they are the industry leader. Now, again, I'm asking why. So corners, PSA Gem Mint 10, their grading scale says 4 perfectly sharp corners. Okay, sounds good. Beckett, their corners definitions for a Gem Mint 9.5 on their grading scale is mint to the naked eye, and it does mention that slight imperfections are allowed under magnification. Doesn't say how much magnification, but under magnification. SGC, their definition and scale for Gem Mint 10 for corners just says 4 sharp corners, and then they give it an asterisk after it. I looked high and low on their website. I could not figure out what the asterisk meant. It did not point to anything. I looked at all the subtext and everything I could see. There's nothing that really defines what the asterisk means. So I don't know. And then I going to CSG, their Gem Mint 10, their new scale Gem Mint 10. It says perfect to the naked eye and Mint Plus under 10x magnification. So they list a magnification power at 10x. So there's no kind of guessing for that. Okay, going back to surface. PSA Gem Mint 10. Sharp focus, full original gloss, no staining, may allow slight printing imperfection if it doesn't impair the overall appeal of the card. Okay, fair enough. Beckett Gem Mint 9.5. Their definition for a Gem Mint surface is a few extremely minor print spots allowed under intense scrutiny. What intense scrutiny means doesn't really say. Deep color, devoid of registration or focus imperfections. Perfect gloss, devoid of scratches and metallic print lines. So, looking back at PSA, sharp focus, Beckett Gem Mint 9.5 says deep color, devoid of registration or focus imperfections. So, pretty similar. Full original gloss for the PSA 10, Beckett Gem Mint 9.5 says perfect gloss. No staining for PSA 10. Doesn't really mention staining in the Beckett 9.5. And then Gem Mint PSA 10 may allow slight printing imperfection. And then the Beckett 9.5 says, the imperfections they mention are minor print spots, and that's about it, because it says devoid of scratches and metallic print lines. So moving over to SGC, again, sharp focus, pretty similar to the PSA. No stains, no breaks in surface gloss, no print or refractor lines, no visible wear, slight print spot allowed, if only visible under close scrutiny and does not detract from the aesthetics of the card. So that's really similar to the PSA 10. And then the CSG says free of print spots, perfect gloss, devoid of any surface flaws. So far, the corners and the surface for the four grading companies are all relatively similar. Now moving on to edges. The PSA grading standards does not mention anything about edges, but I will come back to that in just a second because SGC is the same thing. But Beckett and CSG, they do address edges, so I'll go over those really quickly. So for edges and the Beckett Gem Mint 9.5, their definition is virtually mint to the naked eye, speck of wear under intense scrutiny. That is real similar to the definition for the corners, the mint to the naked eye and slight imperfection allowed under magnification. So those are pretty close, those are pretty similar. And then CSG is the same thing. For their edges and a Gem Mint 10, flawless under 10x magnification, which is pretty similar to their corners definition, which is perfect to the naked eye, and mint plus under 10x magnification. Now I know the edges say flawless under 10x, and the corners say mint plus under 10x, but it's similar. So that kind of leads me to believe that SGC and PSA probably operate under the same guidance, same guidelines, that their edges are kind of wrapped into with the corner definition. So for edges should be, the edges should be sharp, perfectly sharp. For PSA and SGC, again, edges should be sharp, asterisk, whatever that means. Now, going back to centering, moving on to centering, I should say. Front centering. PSA for a Gem Mint 10 says 55-45 to 60-40, with the back centering of 75-25. Beckett says front centering 50-50 one way and 55-45 the other, with the back being 60-40. SGC, they only list one, 55-45 or better. And so I assume that is for front and back. And CSG, they kind of mix SGC and PSA together. So front centering is 55-45, similar to SGC. However, the back centering, they allow for 75-25, like PSA. Moving back to PSA, you see the back centering 75-25. So one thing that's kind of confusing is the front centering on PSA, where it says 55-45 to 60-40. It kind of leads me to believe that they really mean 55-45 one way and 60-40 the other, up to 60-40 the other, like Beckett does. Well, like Beckett has the two for one way or the other. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to have 55-45 there at all. Why not just say 60-40? So it kind of leads me to believe that you can have up to 60-40 centering in one way or the other, but then the other centering measurement has to be 55-45. That's kind of how I'm taking it. Let me know if you think that if it's if your understanding is different or if your experience is different, I'd be happy to know about that. So kind of looking at these definitions for Gem Mint 10, really there isn't a whole lot of difference between the four companies. The main difference, it looks like to me, is going to be on centering. And it looks like PSA is going to be the most lenient, allowing up to 60/40 one way on the front. Beckett's, off-centered 55/45 one way. SGC is 55/45. CSG is 55/45. So 3 of the 4 have a 55/45 allowance for at least one way. SGC and CSG allow 55/45 in the 2 directions. That's how I take it anyway. So, and then the back centering, Beckett again is going to be the most stringent with the 60/40. Actually, SGC is going to be more stringent than that on the back. But CSG and PSA both will allow 75/25 for their Gem Mint 10 grades. So those are kind of the main differences that I've been able to kind of just look at. And again, these are from their own grading standards. I'm not making these up. These are available for anyone to go check out and do their own research. Again, this is why I'm asking the question: why is PSA the king? Why is there such a premium on cards in their slab? So now, one thing to kind of note about CSG that the others don't do is they tie their Gem Mint 10 to their Perfect 10 grade. Obviously, PSA doesn't have a Perfect 10; they just have the 10. But Beckett, they do have a 10. SGC has a 10 plus or whatever I forget what they call it, and then CSG has a Perfect 10. So for the Perfect 10, the definition says that a Perfect 10 is a card that has received a grade of Gem Mint 10 with all 4 grading criteria, centering, corners, edges, and surface being 10. This quad 10 is the best a card can be and flawless under 10x magnification. So that's the Perfect 10. If you look at the Gem Mint 10, it ties it in by saying that the Gem Mint 10 is a card that has received a 10 grade overall. However, one of the grading criteria does not meet the requirements of a Perfect 10. Again, those grading criteria are centering, corners, edges, and surface. So when I read that, to me that means that only one of those 4 items can not be a Perfect 10, not be a 10. That's what I take from it. Let me know if your understanding is different. Okay, so moving on to Mint 9. PSA Mint 9. We're going to start with PSA again, and we're going to work all the way through. I'm probably going to go a little bit faster on this one because now you kind of understand what I'm doing. So for corners, PSA, the grading scale does not mention anything about corners for PSA Mint 9. For surface, it says only one of these is allowed, and that being very slight wax stain on the reverse, or a minor printing imperfection, or slightly off-white borders. So for a 9 grade, only one of those things can be allowed. Again, edges aren't mentioned, but centering is mentioned as 60/40 to 65/35, with back centering of 90/10. And moving on to Beckett Mint 9, they define the corners as being mint upon close inspection, with a speck of wear is allowed under close scrutiny. For surface, handful of printing specks or one minor spot, very minor focus or color imperfections, clean gloss with 1 or 2 tiny scratches, barely noticeable to the naked eye, and 1 faint, unobtrusive metallic print line. It doesn't say, there aren't any qualifiers like PSA has, where they say only 1 is allowed. So I don't know if all of those can be allowed for Beckett. But for edges, moving on to edges, Beckett Mint 9 is virtually mint to the naked eye. Unobtrusive specks of chipping on borders allowed. And for centering, we're going to have a front centering of 55/45 both ways, and back centering of 70/30. Moving on to SGC Mint 9. The definition for corners is going to be 4 sharp corners again with the asterisk. This time, following that asterisk, it said A minor flaw may exist upon close examination, such as a slight nick to one corner. And then moving on to surface, it's going to say, it says sharp focus. A minor flaw may exist upon a close examination, such as a small gloss break or surface scratch, a minor print or refractor line, a minor focus or color imperfection, or a minor print spot. Again, SGC does not mention anything about edges, but I assume that the corners definition also applies to edges, so they have to be sharp corners, but a minor flaw may exist. Centering, 60-40 or better. And then moving on to CSG Mint 9, for sharp corners, minor where visible. Must have all original gloss. A small number of specks or one minor spot or surface defect is allowed. Slight minor flaws may be visible. And then front centering 60-40 with back centering of 90-10. Again, a mixture of SGC and PSA. So CSG will have the same centering as SGC on the front, but the back centering will be the same as PSA Mint 9. So again, looking at these definitions for Mint 9 for each of these grading companies, they all look very, very similar. It doesn't look like there's going to be a whole lot of variation. The main variation looks like it's going to be, again, on the centering, with Beckett being the most stringent and SGC and CSG being the next most stringent on the front, with PSA and CSG being the least stringent on the back centering, both having 90-10. So some curious observations I made while kind of going through this. PSA Mint 9 grade, it does mention in their definitions that they allow for a minor wax stain. I did find that interesting because looking at the other grading companies, Beckett allows for a minor wax stain at a near mint 7 grade. SGC never even mentions allowances for minor wax stains, but they do mention staining just generally at the very good 3 grade. And then CSG did mention a minor wax stain allowed at the near mint plus 7.5 grade. So I thought that was kind of curious. And so basically what I concluded from all of this is that, the 4 grading companies, they all have very similar standards. When you look at the Mint and the Gem Mint grading standards, they're all pretty similar. There's not going to be much variance from one card to the next. So if I get a Gem Mint 10 or a Mint 9 card from PSA, it should look very similar to that same card from Beckett to SGC to CSG. They're all going to be relatively the same, very close in anyways, according to their standards. So then, I ask again, why is PSA the king, especially when it comes to resale? If the card inside of that slab is virtually the same condition, because that's really what the grade is telling you the condition of the card. So if these 4 companies are basically evaluating cards very similarly, and the condition of that card you can expect to be very similar from grading company to grading company, from PSA to Beckett to SGC to CSG, why is there such a difference in resale? Basically, if you agree that, per their grading standards, the cards are going to be, a Gem Mint 10 and Mint 9 are going to be very similar for each of the grading companies. If you agree that's the case, then really you're just paying the difference for the plastic that the card is in. That's really what the difference comes down to. There's really not much. If the card's the same, or essentially the same, the only difference is the slab. So is it really worth that much of a premium for the plastic that a PSA graded card is in versus Beckett versus SGC versus CSG? That's kind of what I kind of came to, the conclusion I came to. And so for me, it wasn't worth it. So you know, for my collecting, because like I said, I'm not in this to flip. I'm not in this to get cards raw, grade them, and sell them. I'm in this to collect cards, and I do like uniformity. So I wanted to make sure that I was choosing a company that, one, I liked their slab, and two, you know, I wanted to make sure that, you know, there weren't these large differences in the grading standards for each of the companies, and there isn't. To be honest with you, there's not. So for me, it made sense to go with CSG. I like the CSG slab. I like the new label. And like I said, I basically concluded that, you know, if the condition of the card is going to be essentially the same across the 4 grading companies, then why am I going to pay more to grade my card with PSA? Now, granted, they are lowering their prices now. But like I said, back then their prices were extremely high and they were shut down. So they kind of eliminated themselves from as an option for me just by being shut down. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this, you know. So if you have any ideas why PSA is the king, why their resale is much higher than the others, enlighten me. Because like I said, I just got back into collecting, you know, a year or 2 years ago, year and a half, something like that, whenever the pandemic just started. I was going through my garage, and I came across some of the cards I had stored from when I was a child, or a teenager, I should say. And it kind of, you know, brought back that nostalgia. And, you know, Kobe Bryant passed away, and I'm a Lakers fan, and I've always been a big Kobe Bryant fan because of that. And I did have, you know, I found a couple of his cards that I had, and I just kind of got that itch to collect again. So that's it. That's kind of it for me. Let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments. I'd love to know more, if you know more, you know, about why PSA is in the position they're in. And yeah, that'll be it for me today. Take care, everyone. In the next video, I should be back to opening up some more stuff. So come back again. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.